Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be with you for your church revitalizing event. Doing such events virtually is a new experience for most of us. Before this COVID thing hit us, I had never heard of Zoom or the various electronic ways of connecting that we now enjoy so much. A meeting with you this way is easier and a whole lot less expensive, but it's not as good as being with you in person. Communication is always more effective when we can be in the same room together. But if it hadn't been for these high tech benefits that we enjoy, this meeting just probably would never have happened. And Kelowna is a long way from Peterborough, unfortunately. Airfares are expensive. I did a lot of traveling during my working years, and for the first 10 or 15 years of my retirement, I can't do that anymore. COVID is one reason, of course, but even when we got rid of that plague, or when we get rid of that plague, old age will keep me nailed down pretty effectively. That won't go away. If there's anything good coming out of COVID, it's that we've learned to use this technology. I'm sitting in my own bedroom and I only have to get dressed from the waist up. For all you know, I could be wearing my pajama bottoms and bathroom slippers. Another thing we've learned out of this pandemic is how important it is to get together, to be a family. A year ago last Christmas, when we were in the deepest of isolation, I realized just how much we lose when we can't be together. Bev, my wife, and we were alone in our tiny two-room apartment. Christmas dinner was delivered on paper plates to our door, and both of us just spent the time aching for the presence of our loved ones. So I'm so glad we can be together with Zoom, and I hope we keep doing that when COVID is just an unhappy memory. But we must never, ever think that electronic stuff is a substitute for being together in the flesh. In the very first chapter of the Bible, we find that ancient wisdom. The storyteller quotes God as saying, "It is not good that the human should be alone." Humans are social animals. We are not created to be alone. And Jesus underlined that wisdom when he said, "Whenever two or three are gathered in my name, I am there with them." The key word there is gathered, together, in family, in community. That old time writer from many centuries ago said, John Donne said, "Nobody is an island sufficient to themselves." One of the things I miss about in the flesh gatherings is that singing becomes so much more difficult. The United Church has always been a singing church, and I hope that doesn't get lost as we move out of COVID and into healthier times. It does remind me of the story about the minister who decided to start the service with a sing-song. I don't know whether that was Joan or not, but somebody did. Anyway, she said, "Who can think of a hymn about joy?" Well, immediately the obvious suggestion, "Joyful, joyful, we adore thee," and so forth. Well, how about light? Do you know a hymn about light? Oh, of course. "Lead kindly light amid the encircling gloom." Oh, okay. Well, here's a tough one. Here's a tough one, said the minister. "Sex." Well, there was dead silence, not a sound. Finally, from the very back row, the tiny voice of 95-year-old Mabel. "Precious memories, how they linger." There's a poem by J.M. Barrie that says, "God gave us memories that we might have roses in December." 95-year-old Mabel treasured a bouquet of roses in December. And among those memory verses that I am still enjoying is of a Sunday quite a few years ago. I need to put a cough drop in my mouth because my mouth gets dry. Anyway, we had a snowfall just like the one we had about a week ago here in Kelowna. The minister of our church, we're having a well-deserved Sunday off. So they asked Bev and me to take the service on the first Sunday after Christmas. Well, that Sunday, we woke up to about a foot of snow. It was awful. We had a four-wheel drive van at that time, so Bev and I would have no trouble getting to church. And anyway, the first Sunday after Christmas was always light. Attendance was sparse. Maybe that's they thought it was why they thought it was safe to invite me to preach. But with a foot of snow, would anybody show up? Well, probably no more than half a dozen, Bev and I were saying to each other. So we'll just have some coffee and a bit of a conversation and then send them home. But no, there were about 100 hardy folks there, and they all had gray hair. These were the older pillars of the church. This, in fact, was the core strength of that congregation. And as I looked out at those old people, I estimated that they probably did 80% of the work of the congregation and probably put 80% of the money on the offering plate. If these people left the church, it would collapse. We could lose almost any other group, but as long as we retained that bunch of old geezers, the congregation could go limping along. But that's when it occurred to me that us oldsters have that great treasure of memories, all those roses in December. And then I realized that it's us fogies, hey, we're the most important people in the church. So it's to those of you who think of yourselves as old, I'm talking to you. But of course, also to those of you who expect to be old someday, and I guess that should include all the rest. I'm a storyteller by profession. I read the Bible chiefly as a source of stories the stories have within them that distilled wisdom of an ancient people. And the lectionary passage set for that particular Sunday was the story of Anna and Simeon. Most people don't know that story, but it's one of the best ones that's related to the Christmas season. And the older I get, the more it speaks to me. Now, that story was handed down, like so many of those biblical stories, handed down because people sensed there was something beautiful and profound hidden within it. Mary and Joseph, the parents of Jesus, were observant Jews. And the tradition was that Jews would bring their firstborn son to the temple or synagogue to dedicate him to God. Now, in that temple, Mary and Joseph ran into Anna and Simeon. They were a couple of old people. They were the backbone of much that happened in those days, just as old people are now. Now, old Simeon had had a dream. He dreamt that he would not die until he had seen the promised Messiah. And when he saw the child Jesus, he knew instinctively that this was the one. Don't ask how he knew. He just knew this was the promised Messiah. And now I can die in peace, he said. Well, old Anna was there too. She was 84, the Bible tells us, and she pretty well lived in the temple. One look at that baby, and Anna had the same realization as old Simeon. And so she went around telling everyone who would listen about this child. Now, the point here is that it was those two old crocs, a half-blind, bent-over, white-haired old geezer, and a wrinkled old biddy bent over by her widow's hump. Those old fogies had the wisdom to understand what this child was all about. It wasn't their eyesight, it wasn't their education. It was that elusive, much neglected, undervalued gift of wisdom, the ability to understand beyond the obvious, the grace to believe what their heart told them must be true. Anna and Simeon valued the treasure chest of memories that gave them the gift of wisdom, even their memories of pain and suffering, the sweet perfume of those roses in December. The sweet fragrance of roses helps us to know and believe that old age is not a disease. It's an achievement. It's an accomplishment. It's an honor. And the wisdom of the old is not a head full of information like Wikipedia. It's more like the northern lights, the aurora borealis that changes shape and color and can never be nailed down, but it continues to feed our souls if only we'll look up in wonder. Now, many of you are members of that honorable estate. Many of you have that ancient, fluid wisdom. If only you will see it, if only you will trust it. And I'm calling on all you silver-haired seniors to celebrate all you have been in your life, to enjoy the wisdom you have, even if nobody else thinks you have wisdom, to celebrate the life you have lived and that includes all the pain as well as the blessings, and to embrace the future in whatever way it unfolds for you. Your badge of honor is your wrinkles. They are an achievement. They tell the story of your life. So I'd like to hold up for you the words of Dag Hammarskjöld, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. He said, "For all that has been, thanks. For all that is to be, yes." Just listen to that again. For all that has been, thanks. For all that is to be, yes. So, by now you know that I am convinced that old age is an ancient and honorable estate. I know that's an uphill battle against popular culture, especially as it's expressed in advertising. They try to tell you that old age is something to be avoided at all costs. It's impossible and it's tragic. And it's downright stupid, because the only cure for old age is death. The tragedy is that so many of us older seniors buy into that false mythology. We are ashamed of being old, and that is so very sad. So many seniors who have bought into that cruel fiction that aging is to be avoided and denied, sublimated. So many of us have bought into that consumer mentality that denies the fragrance of those roses in December, that values nothing that cannot be counted or consumed. Old age is not for sissies. You've heard that saying. Well, it's true, sort of. Old age comes with a load of crud, yes, but also a barrel of blessings. I am now a well-aged 87-year vintage. I am old. I mean, seriously old. I'm not some healthy 70-year-old playing golf in Florida. I mean old as in 80 or 90 or 100. I mean old with a decent set of wrinkles. I don't remember exactly when I got old, but I woke up one morning and there I was in the bathroom mirror, an old fogey, a geezer, an old coot. How did that happen? When did that happen? I mean, I went to bed the night before as a distinguished elder, decently gray, Dr. Milton, if you please. Next morning I woke up, I was just an old fart. I had just got fitted with a pacemaker. That's right in there. My heart wasn't pumping enough blood to my brain, said the doctor. So my kids said they already knew that. A few months before, I'd had cataract surgery on both eyes, and I could see again. And then Bev, my life partner for 64 years, she decided to give up her driver's license. She had a close call and decided, smart woman, to quit while she was ahead. And Bev, too, had some tough news from the doctor. And then the house and the yard and the payments and the bills all became a bit too much. Next thing we knew, we'd sold the house we'd lived in for more than 30 years and checked into a senior's residence. It's called the Dorchester here in downtown Kelowna. The COVID pandemic has made us aware of how many seniors there are. Our numbers have exploded, and this is a new thing. Until a few decades ago, there was never very many really old people, a few, of course, but suddenly this age group, 80 to 100, is the fastest growing demographic. There are far more of us old geezers and biddies than there ever were before. We are the wrinkled pioneers, and we're popping up like dandelions in springtime. We are the silver tsunami. Until our generation came along, most people died in their 50s and 60s. Sure, there was the occasional exception, like my grandma, who made it through to 83, excuse me. But for most folks, there was no such thing as retirement. About the time I was born, way back in 1934, some mandarin in Washington decreed that the retirement age should be 65. And there were a few lucky people who enjoyed many years after retirement, but most of the guys got their gold watch. They sat on the front porch for a year or two smoking a pipe, and then they died. It was the decent thing to do. The play is over, ring down the curtain. As for the women, things pretty much went downhill after menopause. If they survived having a dozen babies, their job was just to get out of the way. But nowadays, if you go down to Phoenix or Southern California or Florida, you can see mile after mile of trailer parks full of snowbirds from Canada and the northern US. And that's a whole new phenomenon, a direct result of the healthcare, pension plans, and savings investments. And there are thousands more going on cruises or traveling around in motorhomes or volunteering for every worthwhile project under the sun, or at least they would be, except for this COVID thing. I think we should stop calling retired people old. 65 to 80 is extended middle age. It's not old. Like millions of others, Bev and I thought we became senior citizens when we hit 65. We were strong and healthy. We had a fine time traveling, doing hobbies, time with friends, enjoying grandkids. But that easy lifestyle came to a crashing end for many of us sometime between 75 and 85. And that's as we found out that we couldn't do the snowbirding thing or the motorhome thing or the cruise thing anymore. And that's because, like Bev or me, sooner or later, seniors have health or personal issues that ground them. And that's when old age really begins. Along comes COVID-19, the virus, doing its best to wipe out us troublesome oldsters who are just sitting around soaking up your healthcare dollars. As I said earlier, I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories and I like to collect stories. It's a lifetime habit, an addiction, if you like. I found myself collecting a whole batch of interesting stories from interesting and lively seniors. I mean, real seniors, people who are seriously old. These are the old folks with whom we share our seniors residence here in the Dorchester. Now, their stories and stories from lots of other sources all got shoved together in a book called Well Aged. Now, this is the commercial, folks. This is what I wrote in this book. Old age is awful. Old age is wonderful. The best age is 82. Yes, it is. Old age is both the best of times and the worst of times. For some, it's pretty much one or the other, but for most of us, these are the best years of our lives, even though we could recite a litany about joints that hurt and disorganized organs, and I could tell you about my arthritic thumb and my bad knee. People who like to do statistics do surveys about just about everything, and some of them did surveys that said 82-year-olds were happier than people at any other age. A couple of years ago, I was enjoying a cup of coffee after church when a young child came up to me. I'm guessing 4 or 5 years old. She came and she said, "Are you old?" Well, I was kind of taken aback by the question of it, but I stammered out something like, "Well, I guess I am." And then she looked right at me and she said, "Does it hurt?" Well, that knocked me right back on my butt. I don't remember what I said, but I know what I should have said. I should have said, "Yes, it hurts, little girl. It hurts like hell sometimes. And sometimes it's pure delight. It's the best of times and the worst of times." So yes, we need to take the pain of old age seriously, but we also must focus on the delights. If we focus all our lives on all the crud that goes with being old, it'll be a totally miserable time. Yes, we'd like everything to be perfect. Of course we would. We'd like that COVID virus to get out of our lives, and we'd like all that saber rattling over the Ukraine to stop, and we'd like that pain in our hip to go away, and so forth, on and on. Could God have created a perfect world? Well, I remember that song that the kids were singing a few years ago. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony, grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves. I mean, we'd all like that kind of a perfect world. There's a delightful story about a couple who loved golf. They just lived for golf. And then they were both killed suddenly in a bad accident. And suddenly they found themselves on an absolutely beautiful golf course. This must be heaven, they said. And sure enough, there was a perfect set of golf clubs. And they were on the first hole and they teed off and both of them shot a hole in one. So they teed off again. And what do you know? They both shot a hole in one and so on around the course, a perfect score. They were just so delighted. And then someone they thought must be the groundskeeper came by and they said, "This is such a perfect golf course. We didn't dream heaven could be so perfect." And the groundskeeper gave them a long, penetrating look and said, "This ain't heaven." There is a deep and holy wisdom to this wounded and hurting world we live in. I don't pretend to understand why, but that's what it is. I believe there is a deep and holy wisdom in the gift of life so many of us seniors have been given. So let's celebrate the life we have been given, whether we're 8 months old, 8 years, or 1858, 88, 108, whatever. Celebrate the wisdom of creation, the holiness and beauty of life, especially your own life, affirming both the pain and the glory. You were made in the image of God. Celebrate that. If we learn to celebrate the life we have been given, or to put it in more basic terms, to play the hand we've been dealt, we'll not only revitalize ourselves, but we will revitalize our church. Taped to my computer, I have a part of a poem written by Leonard Cohen. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Thank you very much. That was the speech I gave. And then after some discussion, I offered a benediction. Now, let us celebrate the life we have been given. Let us thank God for the pain and the pleasure. And let us celebrate the community we have been given, the community called Trinity United Church, knowing that God walks with us in this journey to wholeness and goodness and hope. Amen.